Hey there, and welcome back to tuning in with us for this episode of Stay Sharp in Digital Engineering. We really appreciate you being here. We know you have a lot of choices with your time, and we respect and appreciate you spending time with us. So in this episode, Jonathan and I sit down with Devin Patel from First Resonance to explore a new mindset of manufacturing operations. We discussed the shift from traditional monolithic systems in manufacturing environments like ERP and MES to looking at more of a modular, data-driven model that emphasizes flexibility, scalability, and real-world results. From the power of a strong data footprint and to the role of cloud, APIs, and AI, our conversation highlights how startups and established manufacturing companies alike can rethink their manufacturing strategies for the future. So let's jump in. Welcome, everybody, to Stay Sharp in Digital Engineering, the podcast about all things digital related to products from engineering, manufacturing, service, and beyond. I'm one of your hosts, Julianne Grant, and of course, I'm joined by my co-host today, Jonathan Scott.
Hello, everybody.
Hey, Jonathan. It's always good to be here.
Good to be back.
Yes, it is. So we have an interesting conversation today. We are going to be talking about a new approach to running manufacturing operations. So in the past episode, we took inventory of the typical business systems that most manufacturers use to run their operations. Things like PLM, ERP, CRM, MES, SCM, and that sort of thing. We all know the acronym soup. But there are people out there challenging the traditional path of how companies purchase and deploy these systems as they grow from startup to scale. So we have an interesting guest today to help us dive into that topic. We have Devin Patel from First Resonance. Welcome, Devin.
Hello, how are you?
Great.
Happy to be here.
Yeah, we're really happy you're here. Thanks for joining us today. I think it's going to be a good conversation.
Absolutely, I can't wait.
So let me tell you a little bit about Devin. He is the head of solutions at First Resonance. He helps pioneering manufacturers transform how hardware is built with Ion Factory OS. He brings nearly a decade of experience in IoT, AI, AR-powered manufacturing systems at companies like Mitsubishi Electric, Drishti. Did I get that right?
Drishti, yep.
Drishti, thank you.
Yep, AI startup.
And PTC, where he partnered with leading enterprises to modernize operations. So Devin specializes in bridging technical depth of business impact, helping shape how advanced manufacturing embraces AI, open platforms, and the digital thread. So with that, giving it over to Jonathan.
Yep.
Yeah,
Thank you for the introduction.
You're
absolutely.
welcome.
So glad to have you here, Devin. It's I'm really looking forward to the topic, talking about this sort of change, because like Julianne mentioned, in an episode quite a while back, we did this sort of, what are the systems that people need to run a business, right? A manufacturer needs to run a business. And just coming back to that, I think we could touch on those, but what we're getting at today is you can look at it differently, right? It really, those are about capabilities, not just about systems. But so let me recap that a little bit. First, I want to acknowledge, every manufacturer's journey is unique, and different industries can have a huge influence on this typical path, like the typical systems you need, that sort of thing.
Right.
For instance, people doing electronics or consumer electronics, they're going to use contract manufacturers a lot. So it's a different animal, right? But so anyway, to speak in generalities, though, lots of manufacturers, they get started with this, great idea, and they start making small batches of their product, and they hustle and they sweat to get sales and ship product and that kind of thing. And as they grow, one of the first things they usually decide they need is an ERP, and usually they've outgrown QuickBooks, and they're thinking about inventory, advanced accounting, et cetera. So, that's a big investment. And so, maybe they say, all right, I've got to do that first, so other things wait. Engineering, shop floor management, while they do that, because it's a big expense, it takes a lot of time, that kind of thing. Then they need to pay for that, right? Because they're growing overhead. And so now it's got to be, we got to invest in CRM. And it sort of leads them down this path of, well, now you have to on that kind of thing. So that's some of what we've talked about in the past as traditional, and I think that's the thing we want to challenge today. You got a fresh outlook on this. So I want to stop talking for a minute and get into an actual question, because I'm excited to hear what you have to think about this. So what is this other path, and what can that look like? What are we talking about here?
Yeah, a lot of times we see it, and we see people playing catch up, and they're talking to their coworkers, they're talking to their colleagues, they've seen how things were done in the past. And like you said, an ERP and accounting solution is really where people will start. They say, okay, now I need to create some purchase orders, and now I need to manage my inventory. And these ERP CRM, PLM implementations, integrations can take a long time. Sometimes they can take years, they can cost a lot of money. And then for some reason, even though an MES is extremely important, especially for engineers creating designs, iterating, producing, they're getting an MES system, that's a lower priority, but installing, integrating, implementing an MES solution, and then getting everyone to adopt it, understand it, and use it effectively, that's just as big of a task as getting an ERP system in the first place. And then connecting the dots between those two, and all of a sudden 5 years goes by and you're wondering why you're still more inefficient than you should be. And I think with everything that's going on right now, we are looking at things differently. Like, you don't have to follow the traditional path. It doesn't have to take years. It doesn't have to take a company-wide adoption of these very clunky traditional tools for you to get the value you need right away. And the other way is just by connecting a backbone and solving one problem at a time. So really what these companies are looking for is a data footprint. I have a problem, I need to create purchase orders, and then I need to figure out what purchase orders I can track and trace. And now I need to figure out how that relates to production. And then I want people to follow a certain way or certain set of digital work instructions. And then I want to connect my inventory to it. So we can simplify these problems. And in order to do that, we can focus less on systems and more on capabilities. And so if we can get visibility, we can get traceability, and we can collaborate amongst teams, that's good enough for now. I can focus on scaling up and going into some more discrete use cases a little bit later. But instead of getting these clunky systems, we can do it modularly now. We have the cloud, we have open APIs, and there isn't necessarily just a right way to do things. It's what are my unique problems as a business? How do I need to solve the problems? And are there tools available to me where I can solve one problem at a time, where I can set a foundation so that when I scale, I don't need to eventually get one of these traditional tools. I can just grow, work my way up. And then if I do want to make a design change as an engineer, or if I'm a company and I need to adapt my approach and what I'm building, I have the flexibility and capability to do that. So we're kind of redefining the way you bring all of these systems in to just solving use cases. And it does make things very, very nice for customers.
And I think you said something really interesting there, Devin. I'm going to steal your words, right? Data footprint, right? That's, I think, a really important concept. And I'm going to give you my interpretation of it. Tell me if I'm talking about the right thing here. Because I think the audience, it'll help them maybe with this concept too. So you mentioned like purchase orders. Okay, I know I need to manage purchase orders. Well, a lot of folks, the traditional way, your mind immediately goes to, well, if that's not working for me in QuickBooks, then I probably need ERP. And the reason might be, well, I got to tie my purchase orders to my material coming in and look at how that's going to go against my bill of material or whatever. And maybe I'm not tracking all that in QuickBooks. So immediately they're like, I must need a more comprehensive, something like that. And your point, I think, is think about your data footprint. What are the data types, the kinds of things you're saying you need to manage? What are they connected to? And think about solving that problem. And it's probably true that you're not going to do it in Excel, right? So, okay, fair enough if they're not thinking like that's not my answer. But your point is, think about that data footprint and what might solve it for you. And there are systems out there that could maybe solve that without being ERP, right?
Right. Because when we get an ERP and now we're talking human resources and resource allocation, and maybe it's not just for production. And I think at the end of the day, what we're seeing a lot in the industry is, I just built something. I need to know everything that went into it, and I need to know how much it costs. But I'm also not going to go back into Excel every single time I make a change. I want that done for me as I go. And even with an ERP, you have your inventory connected to purchase orders. That's not really talking to your technicians. It's not really communicating back to your operators what inventory you have in stock, and then how that relates to any maybe quality issues that come up in the future and how that relates. And so if we just solve one problem at a time, it just makes things a lot easier for everyone. And then we're not having to train everyone and do this year-long implementation. We have our solutions ready to go when we need them. And eventually, if we do want to get an ERP system, and we do want that for human resources and resource allocation within the company relative to bandwidth and relative to the inventory consumption we're using on a daily basis, we can do that whenever we need it. It's just not a priority when we're trying to scale up from the beginning.
Well, it seems to me in listening to this that this would be the scenario that would lend itself well to a startup situation versus like how often, when you're working with a larger company, are they going to reorient everything around and just refocus back on a process So to talk a little bit about those scenarios of a startup and why this could really be a game changer for them, because they don't get hung up in all that admin type and other types of software that takes forever to put in and work versus someone who's trying to turn the ship.
Right. And so you're working with those bigger companies. They have those traditional systems in place. They've already spent a lot of time. They've already spent a lot of money. They have one way they do things. They have thousands of people. So it's a little bit different for them. They're kind of stuck, and it's going to take a lot more time and effort and energy to rip that out and adopt a new tool. For startups, they need to move fast. They don't have time to build up their technical foundation by implementing multiple tools. They need to iterate quickly. If they get a funding event and they have a customer that's going to order thousands of parts, components, assemblies, they need to get up and running as quickly as possible. And then if an iteration comes in, they need to make sure they get that design change out on the floor as quickly as possible. And then if they're we call them runs for the company that I work for, but if they're in the middle of an assembly process, and then an engineer goes, actually, there's something wrong, we need to fix this right away. In order to take that from an ERP to an MES and get the right people involved and get all these different approvals, it's almost impossible to do that. And so if they're bringing in something relative to kind of this new age of manufacturing with an operating system, they're able to say, okay, we have this design change. We're going to get it up to the shop floor right away. We're going to connect all the dots through just the part level and the part number. And then we're going to connect that straight to the digital work instruction. And it makes it a lot easier. And they don't have to do any intense IT projects to make that happen.
That makes sense. I mean, I think it's I don't want to throw in a word that isn't exactly what I mean here. So it's not agile, maybe it's nimble is the way to say it, right?
Nimble.
It's very flexible in the ability to say, hey, I got that data footprint, like you said, it's doing exactly what I need and nothing more. So when it's time to change it, it's flexible. I can make that change and it can support what I need to do instead of being, well, hold on, the out-of-the-box ERP process works like this, so I need to follow that because now I'm a big boy, I've got ERP, I have to follow those processes. Not necessarily.
Not necessarily. I think it's just, like we said in the beginning, if you're focusing on outcomes and flexibility, then you can scale without having to deal with that. So it's less time and money focusing on building your technical stack and your technical systems, and a lot more time building your actual product and shipping that out to your customers and building your business. And it doesn't have to be all at once. You can start with just one team. You can start with your supply chain team. If you think you need an ERP system and you're going with this modular approach, we're going to start with figuring out what we need to build and when we need to build it, and just starting with purchase orders. And then if we want to talk about design, then we'll just talk about managing our bill of materials. Then we go into production. Then we just talk about connecting our bill of materials to our work order execution that we're doing, and go from there. So it does make things just easier over time, but also creating the foundation to help you move forward fast.
So color me a skeptic. I'm going to ask the counterpoint, right, Devin, which is, all right, if you're sort of doing it sort of piece by piece, moving to the pieces that matter most to you, does that create a problem or create a challenge in terms of, well, you didn't start with an architecture in mind from the beginning. You didn't have it all planned out. Does it create those kind of challenges or no?
Sometimes it does. And so what we try to do is we create a solution piece by piece, but we try to anticipate. And so we go, in your perfect world, if you hit all of the goals you want to hit over the next 5 years, what's your technical system going to look like, and what goals do you need to hit, whether that's for your company or for your tech stack. And we know that it's not going to be exactly like that in 5 years. Everything's going to change, especially with agentic AI and how people are getting information now. That's going to be different. What we want to do is have that vision in mind, solve each problem at a time, so you're not just having to take a step back every 6 months, every 8 months to re-implement, reconfigure, but then give you a path where maybe you won't get there, but you can adapt it or deviate from it, and then give yourself a lot more flexibility. So say things change and now your goals are much different, you still have that foundation to give every team the ability to do what they need to do and have the right systems in place. And so it's definitely a little bit more of a game that we want to play, and less of this is exactly how we're going to do things.
Makes sense.
Yeah, so could you help me with some context, Devin, some examples of what you've seen be working well in some of your projects? Just, I mean, we don't have to mention company names, but just some scenarios of, how companies kind of were able to take this modular approach and make fast improvements, if you will.
Yeah, I mean, I just want to say I love what I do. I absolutely love my job because I get to work with some of the most outstanding and coolest companies in the world. We have, and it starts because they are really small and lean teams, and they're really innovative teams. And so we can even definitely name some customers because I want to give some shout outs here. So we have Astronis, and they're building satellites for internet access. And they're doing it with a really lean team, but they have the visibility, the traceability of a much larger manufacturer. So like we were talking about before, they get a design change, they're putting it right into production, and they don't need to wait to iterate. They can make that change as they go, and now they can work on launches, mission critical launches, as they're designing and doing them both at the same time, which is crazy. I've never seen anything like that before. We have Agile Space. They grew from just a few engineers, and now they're building thrusters for NASA. And they're adding digital connectivity step by step. And instead of just a giant system rollout, they don't need that. They want their engineers, their manufacturing engineers and their design engineers to do what they do best. That's why they came there in the first place, not fumbling around with a big system, with clunky systems. And one thing I didn't really mention maybe a little bit is how hard it is for these systems to communicate with each other. It's you have an ERP system, and then you have maybe upstairs in your office building, you have your supply chain managers, and you have anyone on your business analysis team, anyone on your financial team. They're just focusing on the ERP system. Anyone on the shop floor team downstairs in a warehouse, they're just focused on the MES system. And in order to make agile changes, those need to connect. They need to connect quickly. They need to connect easily. And then if one of those systems gets an update or gets a new release or something changes with the API, now we need to take a step back, reconfigure. But what happens if there's a design change when we're reconfiguring the system? How does that information get there? And never mind just going one way, going back and forth. And so with us, with our customers, the main thing we focus on is outcomes like visibility, traceability, speed, and using speed and accuracy at the foundation of everything we do, so that we can stand up to a legacy system or a legacy stack and give our customers what they need in terms of value out of it, instead of just saying we have to have all these different features in it.
Yeah, because some of what you just said, some of the examples you gave, to me, they sound like highly regulated industries, right? Or at least highly particular in terms of certification of materials and those kinds of things. That's not necessarily what I was expecting out of the way you were describing this, Devin. So, I mean, how are you able to do all that? I mean, is it just the devil's in the details and you got to pay attention to it? Or how can you support that and be so nimble?
So timing's a big part of it. So in kind of maybe 5 or 6 years ago in my career, when I was working at PTC, we worked with a lot of defense customers, a lot of Boeing, Lockheed Martin, and Northrop Grumman. And so with that, you're almost always seeing their solutions on their own servers. We call it on-prem. And so that requires a lot of infrastructure. That requires consulting hours. And it requires a lot of maintenance. And you need that because of security, and you have always needed that. That was typically just industry standard. But with us, with the cloud and cloud improvements that have been made, you can give small teams the same level of security that used to be available to only big manufacturers. And in particular, we use the AWS GovCloud. Do you need ITAR compliance? Yeah, we have ITAR compliant infrastructure now. And you can have that for a very small team at a fraction of the cost of an on-prem solution, because it's not just the computing costs. It's going to be the infrastructure costs. Who's going to build that infrastructure? What servers need available to you? We can outsource a little bit of that to a provider that we trust, that is used by many different manufacturers around the world. So because of how accessible, extremely secure cloud interfaces are now, we're able to use that. And then we're also able to use modern APIs to let tools connect without huge IT projects and connect tools straight to your system. And that's been the biggest thing for us. I think we got a little lucky in that when we were starting at First Resonance, cloud computing technology has gotten a lot more accessible, a lot better, and a lot more trusted. So now that when we talk to new customers, new manufacturers, we say something like AWS GovCloud, and they go, okay, yeah, we know that's going to work. We know that gives us everything we need, and we know we're going to be compliant and adhere to audits that we have coming up in the future.
So that's, you're getting into, I think, where I was going to go with my question next. So you're already helping answer that for me. I was just thinking about regulatory and have you built that in? And clearly with the customers you've got that sort of already thinking in your data models and that sort of thing. But where I was headed next was, so what's enabling all this? Why now? Like what's changing it? And I think you already mentioned a couple of things, right? Cloud, one, and open APIs, another, right? I mean, I think I'll say what I hear when you say that is I hear RESTful APIs, things that are self-describing, things that are making it easier for anybody to connect to anything. But what else? What else is enabling this to happen so that people could really legitimately look at this approach now instead of the traditional approach?
Yeah, I think how iterative this is, I think when it comes to a traditional approach, you have a process, you follow the process, you have your tools, you generally will use those tools, those technical tools. If you're using an iterative process and you have secure infrastructure and technology, and you're taking a little bit more of a modular approach where you're following at the same time, now it's going to open the floodgates. Now we can actually get into agentic frameworks, and that will change the game. So AI is now taking on repetitive work like scheduling, routing, and quality checks for compliance, Jonathan, which is what you just mentioned there.
Right.
And so now you can even adhere to audits quicker than you could in the past and solve problems of iteration faster. And we're doing a lot of this in kind of what our technology is planning to be in the future. We call it intelligence for us. But now we're able to add more use cases, create more solutions for our customers because we're not just stuck using an old clunky system that might have a lot of approval workflows in place that don't necessarily need to be there.
That's interesting.
Yeah. I gotta. So I'm going to ask a stupid question because I feel like I'm missing something. So when you talk about these iterative changes, and in space, design is a big part of the process. So where is the design work happening? When you say tools, I'm thinking, is there like a CAD system that's plugging in here, or is it somewhere else and it's just in the tools that you're talking about? Like, how does this iterative process and design change on the fly happen?
Yeah, typically it's team-based for our customers or for manufacturers. And so typically everyone has some kind of CAD tool. It could be SolidWorks, it could be Creo, it could be NX by Siemens. And so you have engineers creating designs. And a lot of times that starts in the prototype phase. You're not just going to create a design and just put it straight into production. You'll create a design, you'll create a prototype, you'll test that prototype, and then when that's ready to go, that will funnel into kind of your execution system where you take your designs, you have your work instructions, and then you are actually able to follow those instructions to build what it is you need to build. And connecting the dots between prototype and design is kind of or prototype design and then production is kind of what I was getting to when it came to the systems that were connected. So CAD, definitely CAD first, then prototype, and you can do prototyping in one of these new systems that we have in place. And then you're connecting to something like an MES, ERP, QMS, or these all-in-one systems.
Okay. That's helpful.
I'm glad you asked the question, Julianne, because it highlights for me another piece that I think is important about the story, Devin. But you tell me, part of what allows this to work are all these sort of incremental shrinkages in time, right? So like the time to get your secure infrastructure, maybe that's not incremental. That's a pretty big jump. We went down to GovCloud and things like that. Like suddenly, certified, secured hardware and networks. All right, a lot of projects we deal with that are on-prem, you're still waiting 3+ months to get that done on-prem. And if you can put in a credit card and, show them why you're allowed to use GovCloud and do that in a week or two, boom, you've got the infrastructure, right? So there's a lot of those that are, we shrunk this, we shrunk that, the open APIs. AI, we're shrinking a lot of things, and it all relates back to, so now you can approach the problem differently, right? And that's really what we're talking about today. You're highlighting, you don't have to go at it from I have a big architecture, you've got to do this, then this, then this. You can go at it from an agile, nimble sort of, what do we need today? We need this? Okay, let's solve that. Now we need this other thing. Let's solve that. But what I think is, I'm curious if this is a piece of it, is it also has something to do with size, right? So you mentioned this works well for startups, that if you've got, when you were mentioning the bit about how you get from a change design into execution, if you've got a small group of engineers, a team that can agree to it, approve it, and move it on from prototype into full design and approval, and then into let's make it, then you can do that, right? Now, if you've got 70 engineers, you might need a PDM first because you got more steps, et cetera. But so how much of this approach really works well when you're small enough to make it work, but then you've laid a solid groundwork, I don't know, architecture, whatever it is, that you can grow on top of. But is the team size important to this?
Team size is extremely important. And I mentioned design engineers, I mentioned manufacturing engineers, supply chain managers. A lot of times when you're a small, lean company, it's the same person doing all of it.
Right.
Or 5 people doing a little bit of everything.
Right.
And so when you're building a digital thread, instead of having different silos for where information goes, if it's all connected, you have a design engineer who's the same person as a manufacturing engineer. They're not going into 7 different places now to find all the information they need in order to do everything they need to do. Everything's going to just be in one place. And there isn't just one right way to build a digital thread. It's going to be dependent on your use cases. You might have some engineers on a small team that are very good in production but haven't iterated designs as much. And then it might be vice versa. It might be the opposite in some cases. And having the flexibility to create a system that works well for your team, but also the skill set that the people on your team have is going to be essential for long-term growth, for scalability. And for a lot of early stage manufacturer, growth stage companies, the beginning is extremely important. Sometimes they're looking to raise a very large Series A, or they just raise a Series A, and now they have a goal of putting 6 satellites in space within the next 18 months in order for them to raise their Series B. And they just have to do what they have to do. And they don't really have a choice of being able to segment different tasks to different teams. I think that was a really good point that you made there.
I really like what you said a second ago about there's more than one way to build a digital thread, right? I think that to me is the essence of what you're getting at here, right? Is a manufacturer needs to do what a manufacturer needs to do. And as you zoom out on it, it's a lot of those things we mentioned at the top of the episode. Not those systems, but those things, those capabilities that you were highlighting earlier. And you need a data footprint to give you those capabilities. But you could start at this end and move to the left. You could start at this end and move to the right. You could start in the middle. You could start where you need to start. And that's really what you're getting at. I love that because, so many times when we talk about digital thread with customers, people will ask me like, well, how do I get a digital thread? And implicit in their question is, can I buy one? Like it's a thing and it's all the same thing, right? And the first thing I want to tell them is, no, your digital thread is as unique as a fingerprint. Your companies will look different from everybody else's. So this idea that you could build it in a lot of different ways, I think is really powerful.
Yeah, and what is going to be most efficient for you too? So there's this concept of a digital twin. So in augmented reality, a digital twin is overlaying digital objects over physical objects. In this technical efficiency world of manufacturing, we're trying to relay technically what you're doing physically. Where are items moving? What are we buying? Where are we receiving them? So if we're able to almost mimic what you're doing physically, digitally, then you have your digital thread and everyone's going to do things a little bit differently. And so as long as you're capturing traceability from the start in terms of your process and output, you can grow the thread in whatever way makes the most sense for your company.
Now, are there, you mentioned space as, a rich area for startups and, accelerated development. Are there other markets that you're seeing that are also having that same, impetus?
Similar markets, and I think it's less of a market question and more of a use case question. And so, but markets very much relate to those use cases. So think, we've been talking about iteration a lot. What does that even mean? Think complex assembly and manufacturing. And so lean manufacturing, obviously you see the assembly line, you'll see cycle times of 1 minute or 2 minutes, and they're chasing seconds, and everything has to be exactly the same all the time. And it's kind of the opposite of that,
right?
Where maybe we're building 2 things a year, or maybe I'm a medical device company. And if I mess up, bad things happen. Or if I'm in aerospace and I have a satellite and it's launching and there's something wrong with the launch, there are serious consequences there. And so connecting the dots between design and your final assembly becomes extremely important for a number of reasons, other than just you trying to be a little bit more efficient now than you were before. But complex assembly, complex manufacturing, energy is one that we're seeing a lot of too. I know with AI, nuclear energy is becoming very important. So fusion and fission both. They're a little bit different, but kind of the output is the same in terms of generating energy. We're seeing a lot of that pop up. There are these energy startups that have small, extremely smart people running teams, and they need to grow at the same rate as some of these other companies and other industries too. So medical device, energy, electronic, semiconductor, aerospace,
high
robotics,
complexity, right? High complexity.
I don't know if you guys have seen those.
Oh yeah.
No, humanoid robots are something that we've seen a couple times, and they look like real humans, and it's a little bit scary.
It just scares me. Yeah.
Sounds it.
It's my nightmares. Yeah. They're coming. Well, this has been really great. I want to be careful of time because I know that we don't want to go over and we want to respect our listeners' time. But this has been really interesting. But it'd be good if we could move into the summary part of our chat. Jonathan.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
No, happy to.
Do we have anything else?
Thoughts.
I mean, we probably have time for one more question, but.
I know I could keep talking about the topic forever, but it might take us longer than you want. I mean, I'll jump in. The things that I heard, Devin, out of what we talked about is, okay, we know there's a traditional way to get things done, but startups, people looking to scale, are looking for a different approach. And I think you're pointing out that different approach is here and it's available. We've got that critical mass of things we need to do it. So what does it look like, right? And I think what I understood, the way I would encapsulate it for somebody who maybe is looking for the 30-second view is, when you're trying to manufacture a complex product, you don't have to think in terms of systems. You can think in terms of data footprint. What capabilities do you need and what data do you need to support it? And one of the important things to think about there is, how does that data need to be connected, right? So it's not just a data set, but it is a footprint of how all those things work together. And then how's that going to give you what you need to get your job done, right? So the thing that you're able to think about now that's also very different from putting legacy systems in place is, what order do you need those in? And maybe the next couple steps, not the full path, right? And so you can adjust as you go because this is more nimble, but step by step, get what you need in the order that you need it. Now, I think another thing you highlighted that was important is, when you're thinking about the tasks you need to do, try to think about data instead of the systems those things might live in, because sometimes those traditional systems separate people who need to collaborate, and it's hard to connect that data back. So think about that as you're planning it out. When we talked about what has enabled this, the things that I heard are really just shrinkages of time and effort in a number of areas. Cloud is a big one, right? So in infrastructure, networking, cloud, and secure cloud has enabled people to do things much faster, get started much more quickly. APIs, right? The ability to really connect these pieces of data, because it's not like, I don't hear you saying, oh yeah, we're one system to rule them all, it'll all be in our system. But I hear you saying, no, it's connected. It's about putting what you need in that data footprint and then tying to other pieces of data that you might need. But the open APIs are letting you do that. And modularity in architecture, right? Knowing that you can put this piece, but not have to put all the other pieces yet. Oh, and then add that other one when you're ready. So trying to stay one step ahead, like you mentioned, not paint yourself into a corner, but not having to bite the whole apple at once. You can take it a piece at a time. And AI, that was the last one I heard in terms of like, what's really enabling this is to be able to automate and do things faster and really with less effort. AI is starting to make some of that possible. So the other, I'll say, non-technical enabler I heard you say is teams, right? You need teams that operate either a certain way or of a certain size that are ready for this, that are ready to be nimble and sort of work through laying this groundwork in this way. And the one that I don't want to forget to summarize that we mentioned, I love that you brought this up. There's more than one way to build a digital thread. And that's really what people are after. the digital thread they need to operate their company, to operate their manufacturing. And this is another way to do it, and maybe a faster way to do it. So that's what I heard. But what did I miss, Devin, in terms of things we talked about this new approach?
Yeah, no, I think you mentioned everything and summarized it pretty well. I think the biggest thing I would add that I've seen over the last couple of years is just a mindset shift. If you have the ability, so it's the analogy I would make is you can vibe code now, and if you want to build a website, you don't have to go to school for 4 years to learn JavaScript in order to make that website. You can now start making the website and then iterate and build it as you go and as you have more ideas. When it comes to complex assembly, manufacturing, even discrete manufacturing, you don't need every single system to get started. That's what I would say. And then if you change your mind about something, or if you find a more efficient way to do something, you have the ability to make those changes in real time because you are going to be constantly learning. Your process isn't 100% complete. You haven't been doing this for 30 years. You might have been doing this for 1 year or 2 years or 5 years. So if you have a mindset shift of, oh, it's okay if I find a better way to do this, or I feel like I need to do it faster, if I use the right approach to create my digital thread and my digital backbone, then I never get put in a box of I can only make a certain amount of changes because I have to worry about what these other solutions are doing. You end up complementing your own data stack very well.
I love that vibe coding example, right? It's that reminder that all these shrinkages in time means that don't worry about making a mistake. You can fix it fast. You can fail fast, fix it, and keep going. And that's what's one of the things that's enabling this approach. That was a great example.
Great. Well, one of the things that's coming to mind, Jonathan, and it's an odd comparison because it's definitely not the same, but a lot of the things that Devin's been saying in this conversation are things that Steve Nichols says about the government, right? So it's like we need a good data footprint and we need a mindset to make changes. Yeah. And there's a younger generation coming in. They're really smart. They want to move fast. They want to go fast. Yeah. And so if there's a way to figure out how to not necessarily blow up the things that they're doing, but get rid of some of those systems and just kind of have them start over, sounds like they could really benefit from some of the practices that you're talking about.
Absolutely.
Absolutely.
It's happening. I mean, there are new companies popping up all the time that are doing some of the coolest stuff in the world. Yeah. And they just need a little technical push to get there. It's not going to be a whole thing for them.
Right.
And they have very lofty goals too. Some customers, manufacturers. Indeed. And they're hitting them, which is incredible.
Yeah.
Well, sounds like a fun place to be for you. No wonder why you love your job. It's you're right in the thick of everything. So
yeah.
This has been awesome, Devin. Thank you for sharing this insight about, some of what's going on and what's possible these days. I think we should get you back talking more about what you guys do exactly. But I love talking about this concept, right? So that folks can hear it and think about how does this apply to what they're doing in digital engineering and manufacturing, and how could they sort of take this concept and get some value out of it.
Mm-hmm. And thank you for having me. It was a pleasure.
It was great to have you. And I agree, Jonathan. I think we do need a little bit more of an overview of, who First Resonance is and a little bit more about the product, because we didn't talk a whole lot about that today, but I suspect that that's the foundation of where a lot of this is coming from. So thank you so much again, Devin, and to our audience, and thank you, Jonathan, to my co-host. Always great to have these conversations. And for our audience, if you have any questions for Devin, please be sure to leave us a comment and make sure to like this post if you enjoyed this conversation. There's always more to talk about here, and we always appreciate your feedback about things about the show. So with that, we thank you for your time, and to everybody out there, make sure you make time to stay sharp. Thanks for being here and listening to this episode of Stay Sharp with Razor Leaf. If you like this podcast, please be sure to hit the like button. We really appreciate that. And don't forget, please subscribe to our podcast on your favorite podcast platform or subscribe to our YouTube channel. If you have any questions, just leave us a comment on our post or send us an email at podcast@razorleaf.com, especially if you have any questions for Devin at First Resonance. We'd love to hear from you too. Till next time, everybody, stay sharp.